Some places don't need to be discovered. They've been standing in the open for centuries, watching generations pass, storms rise and fall, empires fade, and stories slowly turn into stone. These ancient structures were not hidden. They were built to be seen, to endure time, to impress the living, and to challenge our understanding of the past. If you enjoy calm journeys through ancient history, quiet mysteries, and monuments that still speak without words, consider subscribing to the channel and join us for more timeless stories. Carved directly into the living stone of Armenia's Azat Gorge, where sheer cliffs press inward and sunlight reaches the valley floor only in brief, measured intervals, Geghard Monastery exists less as a structure than as a condition of the landscape itself. It does not rise into view or declare its presence from afar. Instead, it reveals itself gradually, as though the mountain has been opened rather than built upon. Geghard does not present architecture as an act of domination over nature, but as an act of submission to it. The community that shaped this place believed that sacred permanence was not achieved by elevating stone above the earth, but by withdrawing into it, embedding faith directly within the geological body that framed their lives. Here, belief was anchored not in visibility, but in endurance. What makes Geghard unsettling is this inversion of expectation. Unlike monuments designed to assert power through scale and exposure, much of the monastery's achievement is concealed within the rock itself. Its most complex spaces demand proximity, patience, and silence rather than awe from a distance. In doing so, the site challenges assumptions about how memory, survival, and devotion were imagined by those who labored here. Tradition traces the sanctity of the site to a natural spring revered long before the arrival of Christianity in Armenia, suggesting that the gorge was already understood as a liminal zone, a threshold where water, stone, shadow, and sound converged in ways that invited reverence. When Armenia became the first kingdom to adopt Christianity as a state religion in the early 4th century, this older sacred geography was not erased. Instead, it was absorbed, layered beneath Christian theology, much like the chambers carved one into another within the cliff. The name Geghard, meaning the spear, refers to the lance believed to have pierced the side of Christ, a relic once housed at the monastery. This association endowed the site with spiritual authority that extended far beyond its isolation, drawing pilgrims, patrons, and protection through centuries of political instability. The continuity of that intention is etched directly into the stone itself, where churches, chapels, burial chambers, and monastic cells were not assembled from masonry, but excavated with extraordinary precision. Walls bear carved crosses, rosettes, inscriptions, and carefully shaped surfaces that manipulate sound, amplifying chant into something almost disembodied, as if voices were meant to circulate endlessly within the mountain. Much of the construction unfolded over generations, particularly during the 12th and 13th centuries under the patronage of the Zaccharid princes. This process demanded not only religious devotion, but a sophisticated understanding of geology, load distribution, and long-term planning, because mistakes in rock-cut architecture are permanent. Each strike of the chisel committed the builders irrevocably to their design. Some chambers descended deep into shadow, their ceilings carved to imitate wooden vaults they did not structurally require. This imitation suggests that familiarity mattered as much as function, that spiritual continuity was reinforced through visual memory rather than architectural innovation. Even within stone, builders chose to echo the forms of perishable materials, preserving tradition rather than transcending it. Burial chambers carved for noble families exist within the same rock as sanctuaries and chapels, collapsing distinctions between worship and entombment, between daily ritual and eternal rest. Life and death occupied the same carved volumes, reinforcing the sense that the monastery was not merely a ritual site, but a complete cosmological environment designed to contain human presence across generations. Yet a contradiction emerges when one considers how exposed this place was. The region surrounding Geghard was repeatedly contested, invaded, taxed, and destabilized by successive empires. And yet the monastery endured, not solely through concealment or fortification, but through its deep integration with the landscape itself. Surface structures could be burned or dismantled, but what was part of the mountain could not easily be erased. This resilience complicates narratives that explain survival purely in terms of political authority or military strength. At the same time, the monastery's endurance feels almost improbable. Its continued existence depended on sustained belief, patronage, and maintenance, conditions that could have collapsed entirely during periods of upheaval, yet never vanished completely. This raises deeper questions of intention. Was carving into stone a conscious response to impermanence? A recognition that written records, wooden roofs, and even cities could disappear while mountains endured? Or was it an expression of humility, a theological position that human presence should submit to creation rather than impose itself upon it? Scholars debate whether the rock-cut spaces were meant to symbolize Christ's tomb, the womb of the earth, or the spiritual ideal of withdrawal from the visible world. None of these explanations fully account for the scale, complexity, or aesthetic care invested in spaces meant to remain dim, hidden, and accessible only to the committed. Speculation deepens when considering the monastery's control of light and sound. Narrow openings allow shafts of illumination to strike specific surfaces at particular times, transforming stone into a medium through which theological ideas are experienced rather than spoken. Acoustics reinforce this effect, turning chant into vibration, echo, and presence. Some interpretations propose that Geghard functioned as a form of living scripture, its architecture encoding belief through movement, resonance, and darkness rather than text. To inhabit the space was to be instructed by it. More unconventional perspectives suggest that sites like Geghard served as cultural anchors during periods of fragmentation, preserving identity not through centralized authority, but through embodied ritual repeated within spaces that resisted alteration. What remains unresolved is why such extraordinary effort was devoted to a site so deliberately withdrawn from visibility, and why its builders trusted that future generations would continue to recognize and care for what could not be easily seen or immediately understood. In this tension, Geghard reveals something fundamental about human monument making: the desire to endure without demanding recognition, to preserve meaning without guaranteeing interpretation. Today, as visitors descend into its chambers and hear voices echo against stone carved centuries ago, the monastery offers no definitive explanation for itself. It presents only an atmosphere shaped by belief, labor, and time. Geghard stands as a reminder that some civilizations prepared for the future not by projecting themselves into monuments meant to dominate the horizon, but by embedding their faith into the earth itself, trusting that even if their names were forgotten, the mountain would remember.
Beneath the cultivated farmland on the outskirts of modern Xi'an, where wheat fields stretch in disciplined rows and the land appears unremarkable at first glance, the Hanyang Mausoleum extends silently beneath the surface. Nothing in the landscape announces its presence. The soil gives no warning that below it lies one of the most meticulously conceived burial complexes of ancient China. What exists underground is not merely a tomb, but an invisible city, engineered for an emperor who understood death not as an ending, but as a transition. For Emperor Jing of the Western Han Dynasty, the afterlife was assumed to require governance, ritual order, labor, and infrastructure, just as the living world did. The continuity of the empire itself was believed to depend on the smooth passage of its ruler into this unseen domain, where cosmic balance and political stability would be preserved beyond mortality. The fascination of Hanyang lies precisely in its restraint. Unlike the monumental tomb of the first Qin emperor nearby, whose terracotta army and towering presence dominate the imagination, Yangling was never intended to command the skyline. Instead, it was designed to vanish into it. Its earthen mound conceals intention rather than proclaiming power, hiding beneath ordinary soil one of the most elaborate funerary landscapes ever constructed in early imperial China. Built during the 2nd century BCE, Hanyang Ling was not a single burial chamber, but an expansive underground realm composed of dozens of pits and satellite tombs. Together, they replicate an entire imperial system in miniature: administrators, soldiers, servants, animals, tools, and storehouses, arranged with deliberate precision to ensure that every function of state would continue eternally. This was not symbolic excess, but logistical completeness, an economy designed to operate beyond time. Excavations have revealed thousands of terracotta figures, noticeably smaller and more understated than those of the Qin dynasty. Many were originally clothed in real silk garments that have long since decayed, leaving behind exposed ceramic bodies. Missing arms, detached heads, and faded traces of pigment do not signal damage, but design, figures intended to be completed through perishable materials. Their partial forms hint at a realism that time itself has erased. These figures were never meant to awe the living. They were meant to serve unseen. Their quiet presence reflects a philosophical shift that defined Emperor Jing's reign, a period characterized by consolidation, reduced taxation, and a deliberate retreat from the brutality and extravagance of the preceding Qin dynasty. The mausoleum mirrors this ideology. Its layout emphasizes hierarchy, balance, and continuity rather than intimidation. Pits are arranged according to administrative role and ritual function, forming a subterranean bureaucracy calibrated to maintain cosmic and political order beyond death. Excavations have revealed thousands of terracotta figures, noticeably smaller and more understated than those of the Qin dynasty. Many were originally clothed in real silk garments that have long since decayed, leaving behind exposed ceramic bodies. Missing arms, detached heads, and faded traces of pigment do not signal damage, but design, figures intended to be completed through perishable materials. Their partial forms hint at a realism that time itself has erased. These figures were never meant to awe the living. They were meant to serve unseen. Their quiet presence reflects a philosophical shift that defined Emperor Jing's reign, a period characterized by consolidation, reduced taxation, and a deliberate retreat from the brutality and extravagance of the preceding Qin dynasty. The mausoleum mirrors this ideology. Its layout emphasizes hierarchy, balance, and continuity rather than intimidation. Pits are arranged according to administrative role and ritual function, forming a subterranean bureaucracy calibrated to maintain cosmic and political order beyond death. Excavations have revealed thousands of terracotta figures, noticeably smaller and more understated than those of the Qin dynasty. Many were originally clothed in real silk garments that have long since decayed, leaving behind exposed ceramic bodies. Missing arms, detached heads, and faded traces of pigment do not signal damage, but design, figures intended to be completed through perishable materials. Their partial forms hint at a realism that time itself has erased.
Despite its scale and complexity, Hanyang Ling left no monumental marker comparable to pyramids or other royal tombs elsewhere in the ancient world. For more than 2 millennia, it remained largely unknown, its chambers lying undisturbed beneath fields plowed by farmers unaware that they walked above an emperor's carefully constructed afterlife. This challenges modern assumptions that power must always seek visibility. For the Han elite, legitimacy did not depend on spectacle, but on alignment with cosmic principles that required no constant visual reaffirmation. Compounding the mystery is the scarcity of surviving texts that explain the precise symbolism of the mausoleum's design. Archaeologists are left to interpret meaning through placement, proportion, and absence rather than explicit declarations of intent. Why were some figures headless, others armless, deliberately incomplete? Why recreate entire functional systems underground with such care, only to seal them away permanently? Conventional interpretations describe the mausoleum as a reflection of Han beliefs in an afterlife that mirrored earthly existence. Yet this alone fails to explain the emotional restraint and bureaucratic precision embedded in its execution. Some scholars suggest that Hanyang Ling reflects a deep anxiety about continuity, a recognition that stability required constant management even beyond death. In this view, the tomb functions as a mechanism designed to preserve order against the inevitability of decay, succession crises, and political change. Others argue that it represents a moral compromise between older traditions of human sacrifice and emerging ethical norms, replacing living attendants with ceramic stand-ins. Function was preserved without bloodshed, even as the demand for labor and planning remained immense. More speculative interpretations view the mausoleum as an early manifestation of bureaucratic thinking pushed to metaphysical extremes, where governance itself becomes eternal. Individual personalities disappear, replaced by roles, ranks, and procedures frozen in clay. Authority is no longer embodied in a ruler's presence, but distributed across systems designed to operate indefinitely. What complicates every theory is the profound calm of the site. There is no apocalyptic imagery, no dramatic depictions of judgment or divine intervention. The absence of overt religious iconography suggests that the greatest fear was not punishment, but disorder, not divine wrath, but discontinuity. Unlike tombs that glorify conquest or assert divine lineage, Hanyang Ling feels administrative, almost procedural, as though eternity itself could be managed through careful planning and allocation of resources. One unresolved tension deepens when one considers that the mausoleum's effectiveness was never meant to be evaluated. Its success relied entirely on belief rather than outcome. Once sealed, it had no witnesses and no possibility of correction. In this sense, Hanyang Ling exposes a deeply human impulse, the desire to extend systems beyond the lifespan of their creators, to trust that structure can outlast memory, and to believe that order, once properly arranged, will sustain itself indefinitely. Today, glass walkways allow visitors to peer down at the silent ranks of figures beneath their feet, yet the site resists simple interpretation. It offers no grand narrative of triumph or tragedy, only the quiet residue of a civilization that placed extraordinary faith in continuity. Hanyang Ling endures not as a monument to death, but as a record of how meticulously humans prepare for futures they will never witness. Convinced that what remains invisible may endure long after the visible world has moved on.
Nestled in the vast expanses of Central Asia, the ancient city of Merv emerged as one of the most significant urban centers in the region, tracing its origins back over 2,500 years. Situated in what is now modern-day Turkmenistan, Merv thrived on the banks of the Murgab River, a lifeline in an otherwise arid landscape. Its strategic location made it a crossroads for merchants, scholars, and conquerors traveling along the Silk Road, linking China, Persia, and the Mediterranean world. Archaeological evidence indicates that Merv was inhabited as early as the Achaemenid period, around the 6th century BCE. Initially a small settlement, it gradually expanded under successive empires, including the Seleucids, Parthians, and Sassanids. Each ruling dynasty left its imprint on the city, from monumental architecture to intricate irrigation systems, which transformed the desert into fertile farmland capable of sustaining a large population. The city's early significance lay not only in trade, but also in its cultural and intellectual contributions. Merv became a hub for scholars, poets, and philosophers, fostering a rich environment where ideas from different civilizations converged. The city's libraries and educational institutions attracted thinkers from across the known world, making Merv a beacon of learning long before the rise of Baghdad. Despite frequent invasions and political upheavals, Merv's resilience was remarkable. Its walls, towers, and fortifications reflected both its wealth and its strategic importance. The city's urban planning, with well-defined streets, marketplaces, and residential quarters, showcased an early understanding of city design that would influence urban development across Central Asia for centuries. The 8th to 13th centuries marked the golden era of Merv, a period when it reached unparalleled prosperity and influence. Under the Abbasid Caliphate, the city became a flourishing center of commerce, science, and art. Its population swelled to hundreds of thousands, making it one of the largest cities in the world at the time. This prosperity was fueled by Merv's critical position along the Silk Road, where caravans carried silk, spices, precious metals, and ideas between East and West. Architecturally, this era left an indelible mark. Grand mosques, madrasas, and palaces adorned the city, while sophisticated water management systems ensured reliable irrigation. The city's citadel, known as Gaya Kala, became a symbol of both power and cultural achievement, its walls enclosing a complex network of streets, homes, and public buildings. Merv's urban sophistication rivaled that of Baghdad, reflecting a city at the zenith of its development. Merv also became a cultural melting pot. Scholars from Persia, India, and the Islamic world settled here, exchanging knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. The city produced influential figures whose works were disseminated across the Islamic world. Merv's libraries were legendary, filled with manuscripts that chronicled the wisdom of centuries. Trade, religion, and culture intertwined seamlessly, creating a vibrant urban tapestry. Markets bustled with merchants, while scholars debated in courtyards and mosques. Merv's influence extended far beyond its walls. It became a reference point for travelers, chroniclers, and geographers who marveled at the city's wealth and sophistication. In many ways, Merv exemplified the height of urban civilization in the medieval Islamic world.
Despite its golden era, Merv's fortune was never permanent. The city faced repeated invasions and political turmoil, culminating in catastrophic destruction during the Mongol conquests of the 13th century. Genghis Khan's army, relentless in its campaign across Central Asia, decimated Merv in 1221, killing tens of thousands of inhabitants and reducing the city to ruins. Historical accounts describe the scale of devastation as unprecedented. Streets once filled with scholars, merchants, and artisans were left silent, and libraries and palaces were destroyed or looted. Prior to the Mongol invasion, Merv had also endured sieges and political instability under various regional powers, including the Seljuks and Khwarezm Shahs. Each period of conquest weakened the city's infrastructure, disrupted trade, and displaced populations. Despite these setbacks, Merv continued to be partially inhabited, and small communities sought to maintain its legacy, though the city never fully regained its former grandeur. The decline of Merv illustrates the fragility of even the most prosperous civilizations when faced with external threats. Its strategic location, once a source of wealth, also made it a target for empires seeking to dominate Central Asia. Today, the ruins of Merv stand as a testament to both human achievement and vulnerability, with remnants of walls, mausoleums, and irrigation channels offering glimpses of the city's former splendor. Archaeologists have meticulously documented these ruins, revealing insights into the city's layout, daily life, and cultural importance. Excavations continue to uncover artifacts, ceramics, coins, inscriptions that testify to Merv's role as a hub of commerce, scholarship, and urban sophistication. Through these findings, the story of Merv persists, bridging the gap between the past and the present. Today, the ancient city of Merv is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, celebrated for its historical, architectural, and cultural significance. Its ruins, spread across an expansive desert plain, continue to captivate historians, archaeologists, and tourists alike. Visitors can walk along the remnants of ancient walls, explore the foundations of mosques and palaces, and imagine the bustling markets and scholarly pursuits that once defined the city. Merv's legacy extends beyond its physical remains. As a center of knowledge, trade, and cultural exchange, it played a crucial role in shaping the intellectual and economic history of Central Asia. Its influence on urban planning, architectural design, and scholarly networks can be traced in cities across the region, reflecting Merv's enduring imprint on history. Scholarly studies of Merv offer insights into the rise and fall of civilizations, highlighting how geography, trade, and human ingenuity intersect to create thriving urban centers. They also serve as a reminder of the impermanence of even the most advanced societies, as environmental challenges, political instability, and external invasions can swiftly alter the course of history. In a broader sense, Merv symbolizes the rich tapestry of human achievement in Central Asia, where diverse cultures, religions, and economies converged. Its story continues to inspire contemporary historians and archaeologists, while its ruins stand as a silent monument to the resilience and creativity of past civilizations. For anyone exploring the vast landscapes of Turkmenistan, Merv offers a journey through time, a window into a world where commerce, culture, and knowledge once flourished in harmony.
On the northern edge of Rome's ancient campus Martius, where traffic now streams past and modern buildings press in from every direction, the Mausoleum of Augustus remains heavy and circular, a vast mass of brick and stone that once reshaped how power imagined its own future. It does not dominate the skyline so much as endure within it, a silent remnant of an era that sought to make permanence visible. What makes the mausoleum remarkable is not that it was built for death, but that it was built at the beginning of a lifelong project of rule. Commissioned in 28 BCE, decades before Augustus's death, it emerged at a moment when Rome was still destabilized by civil war and the fate of its political system was far from certain. This timing reveals that the structure was never intended merely as a tomb. It was a declaration of continuity, constructed in an age defined by collapse. Augustus did not inherit a stable world. He inherited fragmentation, fear, and exhaustion after generations of internal conflict. The mausoleum rose as a counterargument to that instability, asserting that Rome had entered a new phase in which power would no longer be temporary, violently contested, or easily erased, but ordered, inherited, and enduring. In this sense, the structure was as ideological as it was architectural. Its design was unprecedented in Rome. The mausoleum took the form of a massive circular tumulus, drawing inspiration from Etruscan burial mounds and Hellenistic royal tombs, arranged in concentric layers around a central burial chamber. Originally, it was crowned with earth, vegetation, and a bronze statue of Augustus himself. Death was transformed into a public presence, an extension of civic space rather than a private conclusion. At more than 90 meters in diameter, the mausoleum dominated the flat openness of the Campus Martius. Its placement was deliberate. Processions, ceremonies, and the routines of daily Roman life unfolded around it, ensuring that the imperial dead remained physically embedded within the rhythms of the living city. The monument did not withdraw from Rome. It insisted on being encountered. Inside, niches were prepared not only for Augustus but for members of his family, embedding dynastic succession directly into the landscape. Political stability was thus linked to biological continuity, reinforcing the idea that Rome's future would unfold through a single bloodline. At the entrance, inscriptions once stood, including the Res Gestae Divi Augusti, Augustus's carefully curated account of his achievements, a text later copied and distributed throughout the empire.
Architecture, narrative, and memory were fused into a single program of self-definition. The mausoleum functioned as a machine for legacy. It sought to regulate how future generations would remember the past by anchoring imperial narrative to monumental mass, fixed location, and repeated ritual engagement. Yet the contradictions of this ambition become visible when the structure is followed forward through time rather than backward into intention. Despite its scale and symbolic clarity, the mausoleum failed almost immediately to guarantee the continuity it promised. Augustus's dynasty fractured within a generation. The political system he stabilized gradually shifted toward overt autocracy, and the mausoleum itself became crowded, contested, and eventually neglected. The precision of its message was eroded by the very historical forces it was designed to master.
By late antiquity, the structure had been abandoned and stripped of its decorative materials. Its original purpose faded from collective memory as it was repurposed repeatedly, first as a fortified stronghold, later as a garden, then as a performance arena. Soil and debris accumulated within its chambers until its funerary function became archaeologically obscured rather than culturally remembered. This transformation exposes a tension at the heart of imperial monumentality, the belief that meaning can be fixed through form, even as social systems remain volatile. The mausoleum was built to normalize eternity, yet it could not prevent reinterpretation. Monuments do not enforce memory, they merely offer themselves to it. Scholars continue to debate whether Augustus misjudged the instability of Roman political culture, or whether the mausoleum was never truly intended to secure real continuity, but rather to project the appearance of it during a fragile transitional moment. Some interpret its circular form as a symbol of cosmic order and cyclical time, presenting Augustus not as a tyrant, but as a stabilizing axis around which Rome could reorganize itself after chaos. Others see the monument as an expression of anxiety, a recognition that legitimacy required physical reinforcement, that memory alone was insufficient in a city accustomed to erasing its leaders through civil war and damnatio memoriae. More speculative interpretations suggest that the mausoleum functioned as a territorial claim over Rome's future, embedding imperial presence so deeply into public land that no successor could separate power from Augustus's image without dismantling the city itself. History, however, demonstrates that dismantling occurred in another form, not through sudden destruction, but through gradual indifference. As belief systems changed and political structures evolved, the mausoleum's symbolic language lost relevance. Christianity reshaped Roman attitudes toward death and commemoration. Medieval rulers found the structure more useful as a fortress than as a tomb. Renaissance Romans treated it as a quarry or a spectacle, each era overwriting the previous one without fully erasing it. This layered reuse reveals an irony at the core of Augustus's project. In attempting to control the future, he ensured that the mausoleum would survive precisely because it could be reinterpreted, not because it fixed meaning permanently. Its endurance came from adaptability rather than authority. The unresolved tension deepens when one considers that despite centuries of neglect and alteration, the mausoleum was never completely destroyed. Its sheer mass resisted disappearance, surviving long enough to be rediscovered, excavated, and restored in the modern era, not as a functioning tomb, but as a historical artifact detached from the power it once embodied. Today, surrounded by traffic and apartment blocks, the structure no longer instructs Romans how to remember Augustus. Instead, it invites reflection on the limits of intentional legacy. The Mausoleum of Augustus stands as evidence that even the most carefully engineered memories remain vulnerable to time's indifference, that power may plan for eternity and still be absorbed into layers of unintended meaning, and that monuments built to stabilize history often end up recording its instability instead.
Ephesus was not born quietly. Long before its marble streets echoed with footsteps of merchants, pilgrims, and emperors, the city existed in the realm of myth. According to ancient tradition, it was founded by Ionian Greeks under the leadership of Androclus, a prince guided by prophecy and omens. But archaeology reveals a deeper truth. Ephesus stood atop layers of earlier settlements, shaped by Anatolian cultures long before Greek colonists arrived. Situated near the mouth of the Cayster River on the western coast of Asia Minor, Ephesus possessed one of the most strategic locations in the ancient world. It was a gateway between East and West, where trade routes converged and ideas flowed as freely as goods. Timber from the interior, spices from the east, wine and olive oil from the Aegean all passed through its harbor. By the 7th century BCE, Ephesus had already become a significant urban center. Yet its destiny was forever changed by one structure, the Temple of Artemis. More than a religious sanctuary, it was a symbol of identity, power, and wealth. Artemis of Ephesus was not the gentle huntress of Greek myth, but a uniquely local deity, fertile, commanding, and ancient. Her cult drew pilgrims from across the Mediterranean. When the Lydian king Croesus conquered the city in the 6th century BCE, he did not destroy it. Instead, he adorned it. Under his patronage, the Temple of Artemis was rebuilt on an unprecedented scale. Later counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, it proclaimed Ephesus as a city chosen by the gods themselves. But greatness once achieved demands constant defense. Ephesus would soon learn that prosperity attracts both admiration and ambition. Ephesus reached its zenith under Roman rule. After passing briefly through Persian and Hellenistic Ans, the city became part of the Roman Republic in 133 BCE when King Attalus III of Pergamum bequeathed his kingdom to Rome. What followed was not decline, but transformation. Under the Romans, Ephesus became the capital of the province of Asia, one of the wealthiest regions in the empire. Its population swelled, possibly exceeding 200,000 at its peak. Monumental architecture reshaped the city into a living display of Roman order and ambition. The streets were paved with marble, lined with colonnades, fountains, and statues. The Library of Celsus, both a tomb and a temple of knowledge, stood as a testament to intellectual prestige. Its facade, carefully designed to appear larger than it truly was, reflected Rome's mastery of illusion and power. Nearby, the Great Theater dominated the slope of Mount Pion. Capable of seating over 25,000 spectators, it hosted not only performances, but political assemblies and public spectacles. Here, the voice of the city could rise as one, sometimes in celebration, sometimes in outrage. Daily life in Ephesus was vibrant and complex. Wealthy elites lived in lavish terrace houses adorned with mosaics and frescoes, while artisans, slaves, and traders filled the lower quarters. Bathhouses, latrines, and markets formed the social heart of the city, where gossip, business, and politics intertwined. Religion remained central but diverse. Alongside Artemis, Roman gods were worshipped, emperors were deified, and mystery cults flourished. Ephesus was not just Roman, it was cosmopolitan, layered, and alive. Yet beneath the grandeur, tensions simmered. Economic inequality, religious conflict, and the fragility of urban life loomed over the city's apparent stability. Ephesus was more than a political and economic hub. It was a battleground of beliefs. In the 1st century CE, the city became one of the earliest centers of Christianity. According to tradition, the Apostle Paul preached here for several years, challenging the dominance of Artemis and provoking fierce resistance. The Book of Acts recounts a riot led by silversmiths whose livelihood depended on producing statues of the goddess. Their cry, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," echoed through the theater, revealing how deeply religion and economy were entwined. Conversion was not just spiritual, it threatened the city's identity. Christianity, however, endured. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Christian communities had grown in number and influence. Ephesus became one of the 7 churches of Asia mentioned in the Book of Revelation, praised for its endurance, yet warned for losing its first love. Imperial favor eventually shifted. As Christianity gained official recognition, pagan temples fell into neglect. The Temple of Artemis, once the city's pride, was damaged by invasions, dismantled for building materials, and finally abandoned. Stones that once glorified a goddess were reused in churches dedicated to a new faith. Ephesus also played a key role in theological history. In 431 CE, the Council of Ephesus convened here, shaping Christian doctrine and igniting controversies that would divide the church for centuries. The city, once sacred to Artemis, now stood at the heart of Christian orthodoxy. Yet faith alone could not protect Ephesus from forces beyond belief. Nature, slowly and relentlessly, was reshaping the land itself. The fall of Ephesus was not sudden nor dramatic. It was gradual, almost invisible to those living through it. The very river that had once enriched the city became its undoing. Over centuries, the Cayster River deposited silt into the harbor, pushing the coastline farther away. Ships could no longer reach the port. Trade dwindled, prosperity faded. Attempts were made to dredge and adapt, but the problem persisted. Without maritime access, Ephesus lost its strategic importance. Earthquakes damaged buildings, plagues reduced the population. Repeated invasions, including those by the Goths and later Arab forces, further weakened the city. By the early medieval period, inhabitants began abandoning the lowlands, retreating to more defensible hills. The grand avenues fell silent, marble columns collapsed, weeds grew where processions once marched. Eventually, Ephesus became a quarry. Its stones were reused in nearby towns. Its memory survived in texts, legends, and scattered ruins. For centuries, its exact location was forgotten. Rediscovery came in the 19th century, when archaeologists followed ancient descriptions and inscriptions to uncover the buried city. What emerged was not merely ruins, but a frozen echo of urban life, streets worn by footsteps, homes marked by intimate details, temples scarred by devotion and neglect. Today, Ephesus stands as one of the best-preserved ancient cities in the Mediterranean. It is a testament to human ambition, adaptability, and vulnerability. Empires rose and fell within its walls. Gods were worshipped and abandoned. Faiths clashed, and nature reclaimed its ground. Ephesus reminds us that even the greatest cities are temporary. Stone may endure longer than flesh, but silence eventually claims them all.
Beneath the northern edge of Jerusalem's old city, concealed behind an unremarkable entrance and sealed for centuries by debris and neglect, Zedekiah's cave opens not as a natural cavern, but as an intentional absence. It is a space defined by removal rather than addition, where stone was extracted so methodically that emptiness itself became a record of human purpose. The people who labored here did so with the assumption that the city above them would endure, that its walls, gates, and sacred buildings would stand for generations, and that work carried out in darkness would sustain a visible future they might never witness. The intrigue of the cave lies in this inversion. Known today as Zedekiah's cave, and traditionally referred to as Solomon's quarry, it preserves no monuments, inscriptions, or dedications. Instead, it offers only negative space, the hollowed remains of construction material taken to the surface, forcing modern observers to confront a foundational but largely invisible dimension of ancient urban life.
Extending across nearly 5 acres beneath the city, the cave bears unmistakable signs of organized quarrying. Its walls are scored with parallel chisel marks, grooves, and wedge impressions that testify to systematic extraction carried out over extended periods, likely beginning during the First Temple era and continuing intermittently through later phases, including Roman rule. The limestone removed from this site, known locally as melica, was highly valued for its durability and ease of carving. This stone is widely believed to have been used in Jerusalem's fortifications and monumental architecture, linking the cave's darkness directly to the city's most sacred and contested spaces. In this way, the quarry functioned as a silent collaborator in history, supplying essential material without claiming recognition. Its existence was assumed rather than documented, its labor absorbed into walls meant to project permanence, authority, and divine favor. The long-standing tradition associating the cave with King Solomon and the construction of the First Temple reflects an ancient intuition about continuity. It suggests a belief that sacred architecture should originate from consecrated ground, even if that ground lay hidden beneath the city itself. Archaeology does not confirm the legend, but it does confirm the scale and sophistication of the operation. The cave's vast chambers are supported by pillars intentionally left in place to prevent collapse. Channels carved into the stone manage water seepage, indicating long-term planning and sustained use. Together, these features imply an administrative system capable of coordinating extraction, transport, and construction across generations, yet one that left behind no centralized narrative of control, no visible record of authority. The contradiction becomes clear when this immense infrastructural effort is weighed against the cave's disappearance from historical memory. After centuries of use, it was sealed and forgotten, its entrance obscured while the city above it endured conquest, destruction, rebuilding, and reinterpretation again and again. The quarry remained untouched even as Jerusalem's surface was repeatedly reshaped. This absence raises unsettling questions about collective memory. While temples, walls, and shrines became objects of devotion and conflict, the space that enabled their construction vanished from cultural awareness, as though support systems themselves were unworthy of remembrance. The cave's later association with Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, adds another layer of symbolic tension. Biblical tradition describes his attempted escape through a subterranean passage during the Babylonian siege, an act that ended in capture, blinding, and exile.
Whether or not this cave was the literal route of escape remains uncertain, yet the symbolic alignment is striking. An underground space linked to collapse, flight, and the end of sovereignty lying beneath a city that would repeatedly experience similar cycles of hope, destruction, and renewal. Scholars continued to debate the circumstances under which the cave was sealed. Some suggest deliberate closure, perhaps to prevent structural failure or unauthorized access. Others argue that quarrying simply shifted elsewhere and the space was abandoned. The lack of definitive evidence leaves interpretation open, reinforcing the sense that the cave occupies the margins of documented history. Additional theories propose ritual or symbolic uses in later periods, citing traditions that describe the cave as a place of mourning, secrecy, or assembly. More conservative interpretations emphasize its strictly utilitarian origins, suggesting that its mystique is largely a projection imposed by later generations seeking meaning in what appears empty. More speculative perspectives frame underground spaces like Zedekiah's cave as counterweights to monumental architecture. They serve, consciously or not, as reminders that every act of construction depends on hidden extraction, that symbols of divine order and political authority rest upon material permanently removed from the earth. What complicates all interpretations is the cave's atmosphere itself. Its vastness absorbs sound. Its humidity preserves echoes of movement.
Its darkness erases orientation, creating an experience that feels set apart from the city above, even if that separation was never intended symbolically by its original users. Standing inside, one senses not catastrophe, but duration, the slow accumulation of effort without ceremony. Generations of laborers shaped a space they would never inhabit, contributing to structures they might never see completed. The unresolved mystery deepens when one considers how perfectly the cave embodies the fragility of historical continuity. Temples and walls were destroyed and rebuilt, but the quarry endured unchanged, its purpose fulfilled and then forgotten. Rediscovered in the 19th century, it returned not as a source of stone, but as a source of questions. Today, illuminated by artificial light and visited by tourists, Zedekiah's cave resists definitive interpretation. It hovers between infrastructure and legend, labor and loss, reminding us that civilizations are sustained as much by what they remove as by what they construct. It remains beneath Jerusalem not as a monument to kings or gods, but as a quiet testament to hidden work, the unseen effort that makes history possible, and to how easily the foundations of permanence slip into darkness when the future they were meant to support fails to arrive. In the wide plains of central Anatolia, where the land stretches flat beneath an endless sky, lies the remains of one of humanity's most radical experiments. Çatalhöyük is not impressive at first glance. There are no towering temples, no palaces, no defensive walls. And yet, this Neolithic settlement, first founded around 7400 BCE, represents one of the earliest and most complex examples of permanent human community ever discovered. Çatalhöyük was not a city in the modern sense. It had no streets, no public squares, no visible hierarchy carved into stone. Instead, houses were built directly against one another, forming a dense honeycomb of mud brick structures. People moved across rooftops rather than roads, entering their homes through openings in the ceiling using ladders. This unusual design was not accidental. It reflected a world where security, cooperation, and shared identity mattered more than monumentality. With no streets at ground level, the settlement formed a continuous wall against the outside world, both practical and symbolic. Inside the houses, life unfolded in carefully organized spaces. Platforms were used for sleeping, working, and ritual activities. Hearths provided warmth and food. Walls were plastered and replastered repeatedly, preserving layers of memory beneath fresh surfaces. Çatalhöyük was home to thousands at its peak, sustained by early agriculture and animal domestication. Wheat, barley, and peas were cultivated nearby. Sheep and goats were herded. Yet hunting remained important, linking the community to older ways of life. This was not a sudden break from the past, but a careful negotiation between tradition and innovation. One of the most striking aspects of Çatalhöyük is what it lacks: clear evidence of social hierarchy. Excavations have revealed houses of remarkably similar size and structure. No building stands above the rest, no elite residences dominate the settlement. Burials reinforce this pattern. The dead were buried beneath the floors of homes, often under sleeping platforms. Men, women, and children were interred in similar ways, accompanied by comparable grave goods. There is no sign that wealth or power determined one's treatment in death. This suggests a society built on relative equality, where status was not expressed through architecture or material accumulation. Authority, if it existed, may have been situational, earned through skill, age, or ritual knowledge rather than inherited rank. Daily life at Çatalhöyük was intimate and physical. People lived close together, surrounded by family and neighbors. Walls were decorated with paintings, hunting scenes, geometric patterns, and abstract symbols. These were not casual decorations. They were renewed again and again, indicating deep cultural meaning. The human body itself became a site of expression. Figurines, often depicting fleshy female forms, have been interpreted as fertility symbols, mother figures, or representations of abundance. Yet recent research suggests these objects were not dominant cult icons, but part of a broader symbolic vocabulary. Life at Çatalhöyük was not idyllic. Disease spread easily in crowded conditions. Smoke filled indoor spaces. Injuries from daily labor were common, but the community endured for over 1,000 years, an extraordinary achievement for such an early settlement.
At Çatalhöyük, the boundary between life and death was thin. The dead were not placed in distant cemeteries. They remained beneath the homes of the living. Skulls were sometimes removed, plastered, and displayed, then reburied. This practice suggests ancestor veneration, a belief that the dead remained present and influential within the household. Homes were more than shelters. They were sacred spaces layered with memory. Certain houses were rebuilt repeatedly on the same spot, generation after generation. These history houses accumulated more burials, more paintings, more ritual significance over time. Wall art reveals a symbolic world shaped by animals and transformation. Bulls, in particular, held powerful meaning. Real bull horns were embedded into walls and platforms, creating installations that merged architecture, ritual, and memory. These were not decorations, they were statements. One of the most famous images from Çatalhöyük appears to show a town beneath an erupting volcano, possibly Mount Hasan. If this interpretation is correct, it may represent one of the earliest landscape depictions in human history, a moment where people placed themselves consciously within a larger, dangerous world. Religion at Çatalhöyük was not centralized. There were no temples set apart from daily life. Ritual was domestic, woven into cooking, sleeping, and burying the dead. Belief was not something visited, it was lived. This integration of the sacred into the everyday may explain the settlement's resilience. Meaning was not imposed from above, it emerged from shared experience. Around 6200 BCE, Çatalhöyük began to change. The population gradually declined, houses were abandoned, new settlements emerged in nearby areas. There is no evidence of violent destruction or sudden collapse. Instead, Çatalhöyük seems to have been left behind as lifestyles evolved. Agricultural practices shifted, social needs changed. What once worked for a dense, inward-focused community may no longer have suited a growing and diversifying population. By the time it was fully abandoned, Çatalhöyük had already left a profound legacy. It demonstrated that large-scale cooperation was possible without kings, palaces, or centralized power. It showed that belief systems could exist without formal temples. It proved that humans could live permanently together long before cities as we recognize them appeared. Rediscovered in the mid-20th century and extensively excavated by archaeologist James Mellart and later Ian Hodder, Çatalhöyük transformed our understanding of early society. It challenged the assumption that complexity requires hierarchy and that progress follows a single path. Çatalhöyük was not a primitive precursor waiting to become something else. It was a complete social experiment, successful on its own terms. Today, its mud brick walls have eroded and its rooftops no longer echo with footsteps, but its lessons remain. It reminds us that the first cities were not built with stone and authority, but with cooperation, memory, and shared belief. Human civilization did not begin with empires. It began in homes.